Leave and never return. Those 4 words ended my life in Briar Glen. I grabbed my 8-year-old daughter's hand and walked into the freezing night. Convinced my parents simply hated us, I thought the silence that followed was our punishment. I was wrong. I had no idea that 5 minutes after the door clicked shut behind us, sirens were screaming toward the driveway we had just left. I had no idea the banishment was not about anger, but survival. The wind off the water in Harbor Point was not cold. It was clinical. It stripped the heat from the glass walls of my office until the surface felt like ice against my fingertips. I liked it that way. Cold kept things preserved. Cold kept things sharp. I adjusted the stack of files on my desk, aligning the edges until they formed a perfect 90-degree angle with the polished teak. My name on the door read Ruby Griffin, Principal Compliance Officer. To the businesses in this city, I was the woman you hired when you wanted to ensure your books were not just clean, but sterilized. I found the errors that accountants missed. I found the quiet leaks where profit bled into personal accounts. I was 32 years old, and I had built a reputation on a single, unshakable skill. I did not trust anyone. Trust was a variable I could not audit, so I removed it from the equation. The reception line blinked. A red light in a gray room. "You have a courier packet, Ms. Griffin," my assistant said. Her voice was tinny through the speaker. "It requires a signature." "Send it back if it is not on the manifest," I said. "It is personal. It is from a Wellspring Estate Services." I froze. My hand hovered over the end call button. The name meant nothing to me, but the word estate carried a weight that made my stomach turn over. I had no estate. I had a 2-bedroom condo, a diversified portfolio of index funds, and a 16-year-old son named Leo who was currently at soccer practice. I had nothing that required a courier from an estate service. "Bring it in," I said. When the envelope landed on my desk, it looked heavy. The paper was cream-colored, thick, the kind of stationery that cost more than my first car. The return address was embossed, not printed. I slid it open with a letter opener, slicing through the paper with a precise, surgical motion. There was a cover letter and a legal notice. I skipped the pleasantries and went straight to the bold text in the center of the page. Regarding the amended living trust of Elias V. Hawthorne, notice to interested party, Ruby Hawthorne, Griffin. My grandfather. I had not heard that name spoken aloud in 8 years. Seeing it printed there, in elegant serif font, felt like someone had reached into my chest and squeezed my lungs. Elias was dead. He had died 3 years ago. I knew this because I had a Google alert set for his name, and when the obituary was published, I read it alone in my kitchen at 2 a.m. I did not go to the funeral. I was not invited. I forced myself to breathe. I focused on the facts. Facts were safe. Fact 1. My grandfather was deceased. Fact 2. I was listed as an interested party. Fact 3. There was a response deadline of December 24th. Today was December 18th. I swiveled my chair toward the window. The harbor below was gray and choppy. 8 years ago, I was 24. I was a different person then. I was softer. I was a young mother living in the guest wing of my parents' sprawling estate in Briar Glen, thinking that if I just smiled enough, if I just followed the rules enough, I could earn my keep. I remembered the smell of that night, roasted goose and pine needles, the heavy scent of expensive red wine breathing in crystal decanters. I remembered the way the candlelight flickered on the silverware. My son, Leo, was 8 years old. He had been wearing a clip-on tie that he hated. He had spilled a drop of gravy on the white tablecloth. Just one drop. My mother had stopped eating. My father had put down his fork. The silence that followed was not the silence of a pause. It was the silence of a verdict. "Leave," my father had said. He did not shout. He did not look angry. He looked terrified, though I did not understand that at the time. "Take the boy, leave, and never return." "Dad?" I had whispered. "It's Christmas." "You are not welcome here," my mother said. Her voice was shaking, her eyes wide and fixed on a point somewhere above my head. as if she could not bear to look at me. Go, now, before it is too late. I had packed 2 bags in 4 minutes. I took Leo by the hand. We walked out the front door, past the 12-foot tree, past the garland-wrapped banister, and into the snow. I buckled Leo into my beat-up sedan, my hands trembling so hard I could barely work the latch. I drove away and I never looked in the rearview mirror. I spent the next 8 years waiting for them to call. They never did. I changed my last name. I moved 300 miles away. I hardened. Now, this letter. My office door opened, and Sarah walked in. Sarah was my partner in the firm, the only person in Harbor Point who knew even a fraction of my history. She saw the letter in my hand and the lack of color in my face. She closed the door softly. "Bad news?" she asked. "Complicated news," I said. I slid the paper across the desk toward her. "My grandfather's trust. They want me to verify my identity." Sarah picked it up, her eyes scanning the legalese. "This is standard stuff. Ruby, why do you look like you have seen a ghost?" "Because I was disowned," I said. My voice was flat. "Publicly, loudly, explicitly. My parents told me to vanish. Usually, when that happens, you do not pop up in the grandfather's will 8 years later." "Maybe he regretted it," Sarah said. She sat on the edge of my desk, crossing her arms. "Maybe the old man had a change of heart before he passed. Money does funny things to guilt." "My family does not do guilt," I said. "They do transactions." "Ruby," Sarah said, her voice dropping to a gentler register. "Look at the numbers mentioned here, the asset valuation. This could cover Leo's college. It could cover his medical school. It could cover his first house. You built a great life here, but you built it on a razor's edge. You work 60 hours a week to feel safe. If this is yours, you take it. Not for you, for Leo." I looked at the picture of Leo on my desk. He was 16 now, lanky and sarcastic and brilliant. He remembered that Christmas. I knew he did. He remembered the cold car ride. He remembered the motel we stayed in that first night, where we ate vending machine crackers for dinner. "It is a trap," I said. "It is a legal document," Sarah corrected. "And you are the best compliance officer in the state. If it is a trap, you will spot the spring before you step on it, but you have to look." She was right. I hated that she was right. I spent the next 3 hours doing what I did best. I dug. I pulled the public records for the trust. I cross-referenced the filing dates. I looked for the management firm. The name on the bottom of the document was Lark & Finch Fiduciary. I stopped typing. I stared at the screen. Lark & Finch. They were a boutique firm in Briar Glen. They handled old money, quiet money. They had handled my father's portfolio. They had handled my grandfather's estate planning for 40 years. I remembered the name because their logo, a stylized bird taking flight, was on the pen my father used to sign my report cards. It was an unsettling link. If my parents had cut me off, why was the same firm reaching out to me? If the order to banish me had come from the family, Lark and Finch would have been the ones to execute the paperwork to ensure I got nothing. I picked up the phone. I dialed the number for the trust coordinator listed in the letter. "Lark and Finch, how may I direct your call?" The voice was smooth, professional, and utterly indifferent. "This is Ruby Griffin," I said. "I received a notice regarding the Elias Hawthorne Trust. File reference 4492. There was a pause, the clicking of a keyboard. "Ah, yes, Ms. Griffin, we have been expecting to hear from you. The deadline is approaching." "I am aware of the date," I said. "I have a question about the beneficiary status. I was under the impression that my standing in the family estate was terminated." "One moment, please." I waited. The hold music was classical violins. It made my teeth ache. The coordinator came back on the line. "I am looking at the history here. It appears there was a modification filed on December 25th, 2016. My hand tightened on the receiver. That was the date, the night of the dinner, the night I left. A modification? I asked. Yes, the coordinator said, her voice sounding bored, reading from a screen. A temporary disinheritance clause was triggered. It is a standard protective measure during family volatility. It suspends beneficiary rights pending a review. Temporary, I repeated. That is correct. The clause requires a formal reinstatement or a permanent removal within 90 days. However, the typing stopped. That is odd. What is odd? There is no follow-up filing, she said. The temporary hold was never converted to permanent disinheritance, and it was never reversed. It just sat there. Technically, you are in a state of administrative limbo. The trust cannot close until your status is resolved. That is why you were contacted. We need to clear the books. I felt a cold prickle at the base of my neck. You said the clause was triggered on December 25th. I said, what time? I am sorry? What time was the filing entered? Ms. Griffin, surely that is not relevant. I am a compliance officer, I cut in. Timestamps are always relevant. What time? I heard the reluctance in her sigh. The digital stamp is 8:35 in the evening. I looked at the clock on my wall. We had sat down for dinner at 8 o'clock. The argument, if you could call it that, happened at 8:15. I was in the car with Leo by 8:20. 15 minutes later, while I was driving down the winding private road away from the house, someone at Lark and Finch was already filing paperwork to freeze my assets. On Christmas night. Who works on Christmas night? Who files legal motions 15 minutes after a family dinner goes wrong? Thank you, I said. I will be there in person tomorrow. That is not necessary, the coordinator said quickly. We can handle this via email. A simple signature waiving your claim would... I will be there tomorrow, I said. Prepare the full file. I hung up. I did not go home to pack immediately. I sat in my office as the sun went down, watching the lights of Harbor Point flicker on. I was not going back to reconcile. I was not going back to ask for forgiveness. I was going back because the math did not add up. My parents were cruel. Yes, they were rigid. Yes, but they were slow. My father deliberated over a dinner menu for 20 minutes. My mother could not choose a shade of beige for the curtains without a week of consultation. The idea that they had banished me and legally disinherited me within the span of 20 minutes was impossible. Someone else had been in the room, or someone else had been waiting. I went home. I told Leo I had a client audit in the city and would be gone for 2 days. He did not ask questions. He was used to my work taking me away. I kissed him on the forehead, lingering a second longer than usual. He smelled like soap and teenage indifference. I wanted to hug him tight, to promise him that no one would ever hurt him again. But promises were liabilities. I just told him to finish his homework. I packed my suitcase like I was packing a weapon case. Gray suit, black suit, white blouses, starch stiff, minimal jewelry, no perfume. I was not Ruby the daughter. I was Ruby the auditor. I drove to Briar Glen the next morning. It was a 4-hour drive. Moving from the coast into the wooded hills where the money lived. The closer I got, the tighter my chest felt. The trees here were older, taller, looming over the road like sentinels. I did not book a room at the Briar Inn, where my parents' guests always stayed. I booked a room at a chain hotel off the highway, 5 miles from the town center. It smelled of lemon polish and stale air conditioning. It was neutral ground. I changed into my suit in front of the full-length mirror. I pulled my hair back into a severe bun. I put on my glasses. I looked at the woman in the reflection. She looked capable. She looked unshakable. She was a lie, but she was a good one. I drove into town. Briar Glen had not changed. That was the horror of it. The same wrought iron street lamps wrapped in fresh pine garlands, the same red velvet bows on the parking meters, the same smell of wood smoke and money. I drove past the park where I used to take Leo to the swings. There was a giant Christmas tree in the center, covered in thousands of white lights. It was beautiful. It was nauseating. I realized then, gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white, that I had not healed. I had not processed a single ounce of the grief. I had just buried it under work and distance. Seeing the bakery where I bought Leo his birthday cupcakes, seeing the library where I hid from my mother's criticism, it all hit me like a physical blow. The rejection was not a memory. It was a living thing. Standing on every corner, I forced myself to breathe. In, out, audit the feeling, acknowledge it, file it, move on. I parked in front of the Lark and Finch building. It was a Georgian brick structure that looked more like a manor house than an office. A brass plaque by the door shone in the winter sun. Inside, the lobby was silent. Thick Persian rugs swallowed the sound of my heels. A receptionist looked up from a mahogany desk. "Ruby Griffin," I said. "I have an appointment with Mr. Alden." She blinked, surprised by the tone, but nodded. "He is expecting you in the library." The library was lined with books that had likely never been opened. Mr. Alden stood by the window. He was a man in his 50s, wearing a suit that cost more than my first year's salary at the firm. He had a smile that did not reach his eyes. "Ms. Griffin," he said, extending a hand. "A pleasure. We were surprised you decided to make the drive. The roads can be treacherous this time of year." "I am used to navigating difficult terrain," I said. I did not take his hand. I sat in one of the leather chairs and placed my briefcase on the table. "Let us look at the file." Mr. Alden withdrew his hand smoothly and sat opposite me. He opened a folder. "As I explained to you on the phone, this is largely a formality. The trust has been in a holding pattern. Your grandfather wanted to ensure the family was settled. Given the estrangement, the assumption was that you would waive the claim to avoid any uncomfortable re-entanglements." "Whose assumption?" I asked. "The firm's, and I believe the family's. I am not here to discuss feelings, Mr. Alden. I am here to discuss the timeline." I pulled a notepad from my bag. "You stated the temporary disinheritance was filed at 8:35 in the evening on Christmas Day, 8 years ago. Approximately, yes." "Not approximately. Exactly. Electronic filings are precise." I looked him in the eye. "Who filed it?" Mr. Alden shifted in his chair. "Ms. Griffin, our associates work around the clock for clients of your family's stature. It was an emergency request." "From whom?" "Your father. Presumably, he is the executor of the family estate." "Presumably? Do you not have the request form?" "The file is 8 years old," Alden said, his voice tightening. "Some of the internal correspondence from that night has been archived." "Archived is not deleted," I said. "Retrieve it." "I am afraid that is not possible on such short notice." "Mr. Alden," I said, leaning forward, "I run a compliance firm. I know that for a fiduciary to alter a beneficiary status on a federal holiday, there must be a documented trigger event, a signature, a recorded call, something. You do not just take a text message from an angry father and freeze a multi-million-dollar trust." Alden closed the folder. "The file is complete as it stands. Ms. Griffin, the clause was triggered. You were removed. The fact that it was not finalized is a clerical oversight we are happy to correct today. If you sign the waiver, we can release a settlement amount to you, a gesture of goodwill, and close the matter." "A settlement?" I raised an eyebrow. "You are offering me money to go away?" "We are offering you closure." "I do not want closure," I said. "I want the log." "The log?" "The incident log," I said. "The 5 minutes after I walked out that door. I left at 8:20. The filing was at 8:35. That leaves 15 minutes. 10 of those minutes would have been needed to draft the filing and log into the court system. That leaves 5 minutes. 5 minutes for my parents to go from get out to calling their lawyer. 5 minutes for them to decide to legally erase me." Alden stared at me. His polite mask slipped, just for a fraction of a second. Beneath it, I saw something I did not expect. Fear. He was afraid of those 5 minutes. "We do not track the personal lives of our clients minute by minute," Alden said. His voice was colder now. "We handle assets. The file indicates a breakdown in the family relationship. That is sufficient cause. It is sufficient cause for a removal, I agreed. But it is not sufficient explanation for the speed. You are hiding something, Mr. Alden, and you are doing a poor job of it. I think we are done here, Alden said. Standing up, you can take the waiver with you, review it with your counsel. But I assure you, digging up old family wounds will not yield more money. It will only yield more pain. I am not afraid of pain, I said, standing up to meet him. I have lived with it for 8 years. I am afraid of bad accounting. And this? I gestured to the folder. This does not balance. I walked out of the office. My heart was hammering against my ribs, but my face was stone. I stepped out into the cold air of Briar Glen. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the street. I had come here looking for a signature and a check for Leo's tuition. Now, I was leaving with a mystery. Why was the lawyer afraid? Why was the timeline so tight? And why? As I walked toward my car, did I get the distinct feeling that the eyes of this town were already watching me, waiting for me to make a mistake? I took my phone out and called Sarah. Did you get the money? She asked. No, I said. I got something else. What? I got a scent, I said. They are lying. Sarah, they are lying about the night I left, and I'm not leaving until I find out why. I unlocked my car door. Across the street, a black sedan with tinted windows idled at the curb. It had been there when I went in. It was still there. I got into my car and locked the doors. I was not the scared 24-year-old girl anymore. I was an auditor, and I had just found a discrepancy that I was going to pull at until the whole story unraveled. I started the engine and drove toward the one place I said I would never go. I needed to see the house, not to go in, just to look, just to see if the lights were on, just to see if, after 8 years, the scene of the crime still looked like home. The file Mr. Alden had given me was a masterclass in omission. I sat cross-legged on the stiff duvet of my hotel bed. Papers fanned out around me in a semicircle. The heating unit under the window rattled with a rhythmic, mechanical cough, fighting against the freezing temperature outside. I had spent the last 4 hours auditing the trust timeline, applying the same forensic scrutiny I used for corporate tax returns. It was clean. It was too clean. In my line of work, chaos left a trail, panic left typos, emergencies left erratic timestamps. But the documents from Lark and Finch were pristine. The narrative they painted was linear. A family dispute occurred, a beneficiary was removed for cause, and the assets were frozen to protect the principal. But there was a hole. I ran my finger down the column of dates. December 24th. Distinct entries for dividend reinvestments. December 26th. A routine transfer to the maintenance fund for the estate grounds. December 25th was blank. There was the filing time the coordinator had mentioned on the phone, 8:35 in the evening, but in the physical printout Alden handed me. That entry was summarized rather than detailed. It was listed under a bulk header labeled Fourth Quarter Administrative Adjustments, when I had emailed Alden's assistant an hour ago to request the raw data for that specific day. The reply had been immediate and polite. Ms. Griffin, due to the age of the file, daily logs from that period have been compressed for routine archiving. The summary is the legal record. Routine archiving. I marked the phrase with a red pen. You do not archive the day a primary beneficiary is disinherited. You bronze it. You keep it in triplicate because you know that beneficiary is going to come back with a lawyer. Hiding the granular data of that specific 24-hour window under the guise of saving server space was not standard practice. It was a defensive maneuver. My phone buzzed on the nightstand. It was a text from Leo. Pizza for dinner again. Do not judge me. I smiled. A cracked, dry feeling on my face. Eat a vegetable. I typed back. I am judging you. I set the phone down and looked at the clock. It was just past 10 in the morning. I needed fresh air. I needed to step away from the sanitized version of the past and look at the real one. I dressed in layers, pulling a heavy wool coat over a thick sweater. I drove back toward Briar Glen, but this time I did not go to the law office. I drove to the neighborhood. The enclave where I grew up was known as the Heights. The houses were set back from the road, hidden behind iron gates and manicured hedges that stood like walls of green fortification. I parked my rental car 2 streets away from my parents' house, on a public road that bordered the community park. I walked. The air smelled of snow and fireplace ash. It was a sensory trigger so potent it made my knees weak. I remembered walking this route to the school bus stop. I remembered dragging a sled down this sidewalk. I turned the corner onto Oak Ridge Drive. My parents' house was visible through the trees at the end of the cul-de-sac. It looked imposing, a brick fortress with white pillars. There were wreaths on every window, identical and perfect. It looked peaceful. It looked like a postcard of the American dream. "Ruby?" The voice came from a driveway to my left. I froze. I knew that voice. It was raspy, inquisitive, the voice of a woman who had spent 40 years watching the street from her front porch. I turned. Mrs. Higgins was standing by her mailbox, clutching a bundle of holiday cards. She looked older, her hair fully white now, shrinking inside a puffy-down coat. She had been our nearest neighbor for my entire life. She was the one who gave out full-sized candy bars at Halloween and knew exactly whose dog was barking at 3 a.m. "Mrs. Higgins," I said. I forced a polite smile. I did not think anyone would recognize me. She stepped onto the sidewalk, squinting at me through thick glasses. "I would know that walk anywhere. And the hair. You look just like your grandmother. My goodness. Ruby, it has been, what, years?" 8 years, I said. 8 years, she repeated, shaking her head. "We thought you had moved to Europe. That was the rumor. Anyway, that you went to Paris to study art." "No," I said. "I am an accountant, in Harbor Point." "An accountant," she said, processing this mundane reality. She looked past me, toward my parents' house, and then lowered her voice. "Are you visiting them?" I did not see a car. "I am just passing through," I said. Briefly, Mrs. Higgins tapped the envelopes against her palm. She looked uncomfortable, shifting her weight. "Well, it is good to see you. I always wondered. That night, it was such a spectacle." My stomach tightened. "Spectacle?" "Christmas," she said. "The year you left." "I did not think anyone saw," I said, keeping my voice steady. "We left quietly. I just packed the car and drove off." Mrs. Higgins frowned. "Quietly? Ruby, honey, the whole street woke up." I stared at her. "What do you mean?" "The sirens," she said. "The lights. It looked like a disco ball out here, red and blue flashing everywhere." "Mrs. Higgins," I said, taking a step closer. "I left at 8:20. There were no sirens, just me and Leo." "Oh, not when you pulled out," she corrected. "I saw your little sedan go. You were driving too fast, but 5 minutes later, maybe 10, the cavalry arrived, ambulance, police, a fire truck, though I do not know why they needed that. They blocked off the cul-de-sac for an hour. The world tilted slightly on its axis. "An ambulance," I said. "For who?" "We never knew," she said, leaning in like she was sharing a state secret. "Your father is a very private man. The next day, the house was dark, no visitors. We assumed maybe the excitement of the fight gave someone a heart turn. But then we saw your father getting the mail 2 days later, looking fine. And your mother was at the garden club that spring. So we just stopped asking. You know how it is here. You do not ask about the sirens if the sirens go away." "Yes," I said softly. "I know how it is here. It was sad. Though," Mrs. Higgins said, her eyes softening, "to see you run off like that, and then all that chaos right after. It felt like the end of something, and I suppose it was. The Hawthorns have been quiet lately, not like before." "Quiet how?" "Just less," she said, searching for the word. "Less present. You do not see the catering trucks anymore. You do not see the galas. People talk. They say the markets were unkind to your father." I felt a vibration in my pocket. My phone. I ignored it. "Thank you. Mrs. Higgins?" I said. "It is good to see you." "You too, dear. Take care of yourself." I walked back to my car, my heart hammering a frantic rhythm against my ribs. Sirens. 5 minutes later, I sat in the driver's seat and gripped the wheel. My memory of that night was visceral. The smell of the goose, the sound of my father's voice saying leave, the cold air hitting my face as I dragged Leo to the car, the silence of the driveway as I reversed. I was certain, absolutely certain, that the house was quiet when I left. If an ambulance arrived 5 minutes later, someone had called 911 while I was still buckling Leo's seatbelt. While I was weeping in the front seat, trying to find my keys, someone inside that house was on the phone with emergency services. Who? My father had looked fine, angry, but fine. My mother had been standing by the fireplace, rigid with fury. Leo was with me. Was there someone else? I started the car and drove toward the center of town. I needed caffeine. I needed to think, and I needed to hear what the rest of the town was saying. Mrs. Higgins was a neighbor, but the real news in Briar Glen lived in the places where the service industry watched the wealthy eat. I went to the Roasted Bean, a cafe on Main Street that had been there since I was in high school. It was crowded with mid-morning shoppers and professionals. I ordered a black coffee and found a small table in the corner. Hidden behind a decorative ficus plant, I pulled out my notebook and wrote, "Ambulance. Christmas night. 8:30 p.m. If there was a medical emergency." Why was it not in the file? Why did Lark and Finch claim the temporary disinheritance was triggered by family volatility? If my father had a heart attack, or my mother collapsed, that would be a valid reason for legal chaos. Why hide it? Unless the emergency was not theirs. "Did you hear about the gala?" The voice came from the table behind me. 2 women were sitting there, their expensive coats draped over the backs of their chairs. I recognized the tone, the hushed, gleeful cadence of gossip. "The benevolence circle thing?" a second voice replied. "Is it still on? I heard the budget was slashed." "Oh, it is on, but it is at the Hawthorne House again. Can you believe it? They have not hosted in 3 years. I thought they were liquidating," the second woman said. "My husband said Frank Hawthorne pulled out of the country club development deal, just walked away from the deposit, said it was a strategic reallocation. That is code for broke." "Well, not broke," the first woman sniffed, "but certainly bruised. They say it was bad investments, some private equity thing that went south. Honestly, it is tragic. That house used to be the jewel of the neighborhood. Now it feels like a mausoleum. And no heir to fix it up," the second woman added. "Whatever happened to the daughter?" "Gone. Disappeared. Probably living off a trust fund in the islands." "Must be nice." I drank my coffee. It tasted bitter. So the narrative was that I was the spoiled runaway, and my parents were the tragic victims of bad luck. But the timeline Mrs. Higgins gave me didn't match bad luck. It matched a crisis. I took out my phone. I had my parents' number stored in my contacts, though I had never called it. It had transferred from phone to phone over the years. A digital ghost I couldn't bring myself to delete. I stared at the name. Dad. I pressed the call button before I could talk myself out of it. It rang 4 times. Then, a voice. Older. Thinner. "Hello?" "It is Ruby," I said. Silence. A long, stretching silence that felt like the air being sucked out of the room. "Ruby," my father said. He did not sound angry. He sounded winded. "We received a notification from Mr. Alden that you were in town." "I want to see you," I said. "Neutral ground. The park by the river. In an hour." "Ruby, please. The house is—" "Not the house," I cut him off. "I will never step foot in that house again. The park. Or I leave, and you deal with the compliance audit I am about to unleash on your trust." "Compliance audit?" He sounded confused, weak. "I do not— Yes. Okay. The park. 1 hour." I hung up. My hands were shaking. I put them flat on the table until they stopped. The park was gray and skeletal in the winter light. The river moved sluggishly, a ribbon of steel cutting through the snow. I saw them sitting on a bench near the walking path. They looked small. That was the first thing that struck me. In my memory, my parents were giants. My father was a broad-shouldered titan of industry. My mother was a statue of ice and elegance. The people on the bench were elderly. My father's coat hung loosely on his frame. My mother was clutching her purse with both hands, her knuckles white. I walked up to them. I did not sit. I stood 5 feet away, maintaining the distance of a stranger. "Ruby," my mother said. She stood up, reaching a hand out, then dropping it when she saw the look on my face. You look well." "I am well," I said. "I am successful, I am safe, and my son is wonderful, in case you were curious." "Leo," my father said softly. He looked at the ground. "He must be grown." "He is 16, I said. "He is the same age I was when you told me I was a disappointment because I got a B in chemistry." "Ruby, please," my mother said. Her eyes were wet. "We did not come here to fight." "Why did you come?" I asked. My father took a breath. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. He didn't open it. He just held it. "We wanted to apologize," he said. The words sounded stiff, like he was reading them from a teleprompter. We reacted poorly that night. The stress, the holidays, emotions were high. We said things we should not have said. "We want you to know that we hold no ill will. We want you to have peace." I listened to the cadence of his voice. It was wrong. My father did not use phrases like reacted poorly or hold no ill will. My father used words like inexcusable or disgrace. This was sanitized language. This was legal language. "Who wrote that for you?" I asked. "What?" My father blinked. "That speech?" I said. "It is a script." "Reacted poorly?" "You told me to leave and never return. You told an 8-year-old boy he wasn't welcome in his grandfather's house. That is not reacting poorly. That is eviscerating a family." "We are trying to make it right," my mother pleaded. "Mr. Alden said if we could just settle the emotional accounts, we could all move on." "Move on to what?" I asked. "To closing the trust so you can hide the money?" "There is no money to hide," my father snapped. The flash of anger was brief, but it was real. It was the first authentic thing he had done. "It is gone, Ruby. It is all complicated. We just want to protect you." "But protect me?" I laughed. It was a sharp, humorless sound. "You banished me. How is that protection?" "You do not understand," my mother whispered. She looked terrified. She looked past me, scanning the park, scanning the trees. It was the only way. "What happened 5 minutes after I left?" I asked. They both froze. The color drained out of my father's face so completely he looked like a corpse. "Nothing," he said. "We went to bed. A neighbor saw an ambulance," I said. "She saw police. She saw the street blocked off." "She is mistaken," my mother said quickly. Too quickly. "Old Mrs. Higgins? She sees things that aren't there." I did not say it was Mrs. Higgins. I lied. My mother flinched. "Who was in the house?" I demanded. "Who was sick? Who was hurt?" "Stop it, Ruby," my father said. His voice was trembling. "Just take the waiver. Sign the papers. Go back to your life. You built a good life. Do not wreck it by digging in a graveyard." "If you are dead broke," I said, leaning in, "then why is Lark and Finch still working for you? They do not work for charity." "They are old friends," my father said weakly. "I do not believe you," I said, "and I do not accept your apology because it is not yours." I turned and walked away. I heard my mother call my name, a broken, desperate sound, but I did not stop. I could not stop. If I stopped, I would crumble. I had to stay angry. Anger was fuel. Sadness was just weight. I walked straight to my car and drove to the city municipal building. If the private sector wouldn't give me answers, I would try the public sector. I needed the incident log. I needed to prove that the ambulance existed. I walked into the records clerk's office. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. The counter was manned by a woman with bright red glasses and a stack of files. She looked up. Her eyes went wide. "Ruby?" I squinted. "Maya?" "Maya Chen." We had been in the same chemistry class, the one where I got the B. She was the only person in high school who didn't treat me like a rich girl or a pariah. "Oh my God," she said, rushing around the counter to hug me. "I heard you were back. I saw the rental car in town, but I wasn't sure." "News travels fast," I said, returning the hug. It felt grounding to touch someone who didn't want to sue me or banish me. "What are you doing here?" she asked, pulling back. "Please tell me you are moving back. This town is boring without the Hawthorne drama." "I am here for the drama, unfortunately," I said. "I need a favor. Maya, a professional one. Name it. I need a 911 dispatch log. From 8 years ago, Christmas night, my parents' address." Maya's smile faded. "Oh, the night you left. You heard?" "Everyone heard something," she said. "Okay, I can look. It is public record. Mostly. Give me a second." She went back to her computer. I watched her type, her fingers flying across the keyboard. I held my breath. "Okay," she said. "December 25th, 2016. Hawthorne Residence. Here it is. Call received at 8:32 p.m. 12 minutes after I left," I whispered. "What was the code?" "It says—" "Wait," Maya frowned. She tapped the screen. "That is weird." "What?" "I cannot open the detail view. It is grayed out. It says restricted access." "Restricted by who?" Maya clicked the mouse a few times. "Usually this only happens for active investigations or minors, but this case is closed. Let me check the flag source." She navigated to a submenu. "Okay, here is the suppression order. It was filed by a third party under a privacy protection statute. The requester is Crestvale Legal Group." "Crestvale?" I asked. "I have never heard of them." "They are heavy hitters," Maya said. "They handle the corporate liability stuff for the big firms in the city. Why would they care about a 911 call at your house?" "Who is the attorney of record?" Maya squinted at the screen. "Graham Sutter." The name landed like a stone. I didn't know it, but the fact that a corporate liability firm was suppressing a family emergency call was the smoking gun I had been looking for. "Can you print it?" I asked. "I cannot," Maya said. "If I print a restricted file, the system flags my ID. I could lose my job." "Ruby, I understand," I said. "Do not risk it. You have given me enough." "Ruby," Maya said, her voice low. "If Crestvale locked this down, it means they do not want anyone seeing it. Be careful. These guys play dirty." "I know," I said. "So do I." I left the municipal building as the sun was going down. The streetlights were flickering on, casting long, eerie shadows across the snow. I sat in my car and stared at the dashboard. Crestvale Legal Group. Graham Sutter. My parents claimed they were protecting me. They claimed they were broke. But someone was paying a corporate law firm to keep a dusty 911 log sealed. My phone rang. It was Leo. I picked it up, putting it on speaker so I could just hear his breathing for a second. "Hey," I said. "You sound weird," Leo said. "You sound like you do when you are auditing a tax fraud case." "I am working," I said. "It is complicated." "Did you see them?" he asked. He meant my parents. "Yes," I said. "And?" "And they are scared. Leo, they are old, and they are scared." "Did they ask about me?" The question broke my heart. "Yes. They asked if you were grown." "What did you say?" "I said you were wonderful." Leo was silent for a moment. "Mom, I have been thinking about that night, since you left." "You do not have to think about it, Leo." "I do. Though, I remember something." "What?" "I remember you were crying," he said. "But I also remember you were scary." "Scary?" Not to me, he said quickly. You were scary to the world. You drove us out of there like you were escaping a fire. You didn't yell at me. You didn't blame me for the gravy. You just grabbed me. You were like a shield. I never felt unsafe with you. Mom, I felt like you were the only thing standing between me and something bad. Tears pricked my eyes. I was trying to be, I think, Leo said slowly, that whatever happened there, it wasn't about the gravy, and it wasn't about you being a rebel. It felt like a setup, like we were being pushed off the board. Pushed off the board, I repeated. Yeah, like in chess. Sometimes you sacrifice a pawn to save the king. I am not a pawn, Leo, I said fiercely. And neither are you. I know, he said. But be careful, Mom. If they sacrificed us once, they might try to do it again if you come back. I am not coming back to join the game. Leo, I said, looking at the dark silhouette of the town's skyline. I am coming back to flip the board over. I hung up. Leo was right. It felt like a setup. The speed of the disinheritance, the ambulance, the sealed records, the rehearsed apology. My parents hadn't banished me because they were angry. They hadn't banished me because I was a disappointment. They had banished me because something happened in that house at 8:32 p.m., something catastrophic. And the only way to manage the liability, the only way to satisfy the people like Graham Sutter and Lark and Finch, was to make sure the witnesses were gone. I wasn't a daughter to them. I was a liability. And 5 minutes after I left, the real problem had arrived. I put the car in gear. I wasn't going back to the hotel. I was going to find out who Graham Sutter was, and I was going to ask him why he was so afraid of a Christmas bell ringing in an empty house. Crestvale Legal Group was not located in the quaint, pine-lined center of Briar Glen. It occupied the top 3 floors of a glass monolith in the financial district of the neighboring city, a structure that looked less like a building and more like a blade cutting into the winter sky. I walked into the lobby at 9 o'clock in the morning. I wore my charcoal suit, the one I reserved for hostile takeovers. My hair was pulled back so tight it pulled at my temples. I carried a leather portfolio that contained nothing but a blank notepad and the name of the man who had sealed the records of the worst night of my life. I am here to see Graham Sutter, I told the receptionist. She looked at her screen, her manicured fingers hovering over the keyboard. Mr. Sutter does not have any openings until mid-January. If you would like to leave Tell him Ruby Hawthorne is here, I said. Tell him I have a question about the privacy statute he filed on December 25th, 8 years ago. The receptionist blinked. The name Hawthorne still carried weight in this county, even if the money was drying up. She picked up the phone. She whispered something I could not hear. Then she nodded. Mr. Sutter will see you now. I was escorted to a corner office that smelled of expensive cologne and ozone. Graham Sutter was standing behind a desk that was large enough to land a plane on. He was a man in his late 50s, tanned in the middle of winter, with silver hair coiffed into a helmet of professional assurance. He did not look like a lawyer. He looked like a senator in a movie about corruption. Ruby, he said. He walked around the desk with his arms open, as if we were old friends meeting for brunch. I have not seen you since you were, 12? You have grown into a striking woman. I did not smile. I did not shake his hand. I walked to the visitor chair and sat down, placing my portfolio on my lap. I go by Griffin now, I said. Of course, Sutter said, retracting his arms without a hint of awkwardness. He leaned against the edge of his desk, crossing his ankles. It was a power move. He was making himself casual to emphasize that I was not a threat. Ruby Griffin, the compliance officer. I did a little digging when I heard you were poking around the municipal building. Then you know I do not like small talk. Mr. Sutter. Graham, please. Mr. Sutter, I repeated. I went to the records office yesterday. I wanted the dispatch log for the ambulance that arrived at my parents' house 12 minutes after I left. I found your name instead. Sutter sighed. It was a patronizing sound, a puff of air meant to convey that I was being tedious. Ruby, that night was a tragedy, a chaotic, emotional tragedy. Your parents were distraught. My job was to ensure that their private pain did not become public fodder. You know how the papers were back then. They would have feasted on a domestic disturbance at the Hawthorne estate. It was not a domestic disturbance, I said. I left. The house was quiet. Then, 12 minutes later, there was a medical emergency severe enough to require a suppression order. Who was hurt? Sutter smiled, a tight expression that showed too many teeth. Your father had a panic attack, a severe one. He thought he was having a cardiac event. It happens. Stress, grief, the holidays. It is a dangerous cocktail. My father has the heart of an ox, I said. And if it was just a panic attack, why seal the record for 8 years? Why file a privacy request usually reserved for protecting the identities of minors or victims of violent crime? We take a holistic approach to client reputation, Sutter said smoothly. We build a wall. We do not leave cracks. You are lying, I said. Sutter chuckled. He stood up and walked back behind his desk, putting the barrier of mahogany between us again. You are looking for a conspiracy, Ruby, because the truth is too mundane to accept. Your parents cut you off. It hurt. You want there to be a grand, sinister reason for it, but the reality is that you broke their hearts. Your father collapsed from the stress, and I cleaned up the mess so the neighbors would not gossip. I protected the family. That is what I do. You protected the family from me? I protected the family from exposure, he corrected. And frankly, I am still doing it. Do you have any idea how fragile your parents' position is right now? If you go stirring up sediment, you are not going to find gold. You are just going to muddy the water for the people you claim to love. I do not claim to love them, I said. I claim to want to know why I was erased. You were not erased, Sutter said, his voice dropping to a soothing, hypnotic register. You were managed. And now, you are an adult. You have a life. Go back to it. Leave the past in the archives where it belongs. I stood up. I felt a cold clarity washing over me. Sutter was good. He was very good. He offered just enough plausible denial to make me sound paranoid. But he had made a mistake. He had said he cleaned up the mess so the neighbors would not gossip. If you were protecting them from gossip, I said, why did you let the rumors about bad investments circulate? Why let the town think they were incompetent rather than unfortunate? Sutter's eyes narrowed by a fraction of an inch. We control what we can. Ruby, I am going to unseal that log, I said. You can try, Sutter said. He picked up a pen and started writing on a document, dismissing me. But the statute of limitations on your curiosity has expired. Good day, Ms. Griffin. I walked out. I did not slam the door. I closed it softly, with the precision of a vault locking. Sutter thought he was managing a problem. He did not realize he was incentivizing an auditor. I went back to my hotel room. I stripped off my suit jacket and rolled up my sleeves. I sat at the small desk and opened my laptop. I needed a weapon, and in my world, weapons were made of paper. I dialed a number I had not used in 2 years. Vance? I said when the line connected. Ruby Griffin, the voice on the other end rumbled. To what do I owe the pleasure? Please tell me you have a referral. I am bored of divorce cases. I have a job, I said. But it is not a divorce. It is a forensic audit. Corporate? Personal, I said. I need you to look into a fiduciary firm, Larkin Finch, and a legal entity called Crestvale. Vance whistled. You are hunting big game, Ruby. Crestvale eats people like me for breakfast. I do not want you to fight them, I said. I want you to find the paper they forgot to shred. I need the original trust documents for Elias Hawthorne, not the amended version they are showing me. The original filing from 10 years ago. That is going to be buried deep. I know, I said. That is why I'm calling you. Frame it as a compliance review for a potential investor. Use the shell company we set up for the chaotic audit last year. Just get me the documents. What are you looking for? I am looking for a contradiction, I said. I spent the next 2 days in a state of suspended animation. I ate vending machine sandwiches. I drank hotel coffee. I worked on my own client files remotely. But my mind was constantly running simulations of Christmas night. 8 years ago, Sutter claimed my father had a panic attack. If that were true, why did Larkin Finch trigger a disinheritance clause 15 minutes later? You do not disinherit your daughter because you are hyperventilating. You disinherit her because you are making a strategic move. The email from Vance arrived at 3 in the morning on the third day. Subject: The Hawthorne Protocol. Attachment: EVH_trust_org_2 012.pdf. I opened it. My screen glowed blue in the dark room. I scrolled past the asset lists, past the real estate holdings, past the standard legalese. I was looking for the contingencies. My grandfather, Elias, was a man who believed in backup plans. He kept a generator in the basement and gold bars in a safe. He did not trust systems to work without redundancies. I found it on page 42, Clause 7, the contingent beneficiary pathway. I read the paragraph 3 times. Then I read it out loud to the empty room. In the event that the primary beneficiary, Ruby Hawthorne, is unjustly expelled from the family domicile prior to the age of 35, or is otherwise coerced into relinquishing her residency without due cause, the controlling interest of the Hawthorne Family Trust shall bypass the intermediate generation and vest immediately in said beneficiary. I sat back, my heart pounding against my ribs. Unjustly expelled. My grandfather had predicted this. He knew. He knew my parents were weak, and he knew the people surrounding them were sharks. He had written a clause that essentially said, if you kick her out, she takes over everything. It was a poison pill. It was designed to keep me safe. It was designed to ensure that my parents would never dare to banish me, because doing so would strip them of their own access to the family fortune. But they had banished me, and they still had the money, or at least, they had control of it for the last 8 years. Why? If this clause existed, my departure should have triggered a transfer of power. I should have been notified 8 years ago that I was now the trustee, unless the temporary disinheritance that Larkin Finch filed that night was designed to override this clause, by legally branding me as hostile or volatile, or whatever lie they put in that filing. They nullified the unjust part of the expulsion. They framed it as a necessary removal. They flipped the narrative from victim to threat, and they did it within 15 minutes. That was why the timeline was so tight. They weren't just reacting to anger. They were racing against a legal tripwire my grandfather had buried in the foundation of the estate. Sutter wasn't protecting my parents from gossip. He was protecting the firm from losing control of the capital. I closed the laptop. I felt sick. My grandfather had tried to shield me from the grave, and his shield had been turned into a weapon against me. I needed to move. I couldn't sit in the room anymore. I put on my coat and drove to the one place in town that was open 24 hours, the oversized grocery store on the edge of the highway. I walked the aisles aimlessly, looking at cereal boxes and laundry detergent, trying to ground myself in the mundane. I was in the baking aisle, staring at a bag of flour. When I felt a hand on my arm, I flinched, spinning around. My mother was standing there. She looked worse than she had at the park. Her eyes were red-rimmed, her skin papery and pale. She was wearing a trench coat over what looked like pajamas, and she was clutching a basket containing a single carton of milk. "Mom," I whispered. She looked around the aisle frantically. There was a stock boy at the far end, stacking shelves, but otherwise, we were alone. "I cannot talk," she said. Her voice was a terrified hiss. "He checks the phone logs. He checks the GPS on the car." "Who?" I asked. "Dad?" "No," she said. She didn't elaborate. She just reached into her pocket. "Take this." She shoved something into my hand. It was cold and metal. "Mom, what is going on?" "Don't trust the paperwork," she whispered. Her eyes locked onto mine, and for a second, the fog of fear cleared. I saw the mother who used to check under my bed for monsters. "Ruby, listen to me. The paperwork is a lie. All of it." "What happened that night?" I asked. gripping her hand. "Who was in the ambulance?" "I have to go," she said. She pulled away, tears spilling over her lashes. "He will know I took too long. Mom, please. Look at the bell," she said, and then she ran. She didn't walk. She effectively ran down the aisle, her coat flapping behind her, disappearing around the corner toward the registers. I stood there, frozen, holding the object she had given me. I opened my hand. It was a keychain, a brass Christmas bell, tarnished with age. It was heavy, solid metal. It looked like cheap junk, the kind of thing you buy at a holiday market. But I knew it. I squeezed it, and the clapper inside made a dull, muted thunk. Look at the bell. I walked out of the store without buying anything. I sat in my car and turned on the overhead light. I examined the object. It was etched with a faint pattern of holly leaves. My grandfather, Elias, used to carry a bell like this. It was one of his eccentricities. He would ring it at the dinner table when he wanted more wine, a joke that my mother hated and my father tolerated. "Ring for service," he would say, but then he would wink at me and say, "Ring for truth, Ruby, it cuts through the noise." Ring for truth. I turned the bell over. The base was screwed on tight. I twisted it. It didn't budge. I drove back to the hotel, my mind racing. Why would my mother risk coming to find me just to give me a piece of brass nostalgia? Why was she so afraid? He checks the GPS. She wasn't talking about my father. My father couldn't figure out how to program the thermostat, let alone a GPS tracker. She was talking about Sutter, or someone from the firm. She was a prisoner. I entered my hotel room and went straight to the desk. I took a pair of pliers from my travel toolkit. I always traveled with tools. You never knew when you needed to fix a lock or pry open a file cabinet. I gripped the base of the bell with the pliers and twisted. It gave way with a screech of metal on metal. I unscrewed the bottom. A small, folded square of paper fell out. I unfolded it. It wasn't a note. It was a receipt. Briar Glen Self-Storage. Unit 404. Paid in full. Lifetime lease. Date, November 12th, 2012. The date was 4 years before the banishment, 2 weeks before my grandfather died. I looked at the key on the ring attached to the bell. It was a small, round padlock key. I didn't sleep. I waited for the sun to rise, watching the gray light seep through the curtains. At 7 a.m, I drove to the address on the receipt. Briar Glen Self-Storage was a rundown facility on the outskirts of town, a grid of orange metal doors surrounded by a chain-link fence. It was the kind of place where people stored things they wanted to forget. I found the main office. The manager was a guy with a grease-stained shirt who looked at my ID with suspicion. "Unit 404, he said, chewing on a toothpick. "That one is paid up. Perpetual lease. Name on the file is Elias Hawthorne. But you ain't Elias." "I am his executor," I lied. I slid a $20 bill across the counter. "I lost the gate code." He looked at the money, then at me. He punched a code onto a sticky note. "Don't break nothing." I drove my car to the 4th row. The snow had not been plowed here. I had to crunch through ankle-deep drifts to get to the door. Unit 404. I inserted the small key from the bell keychain into the padlock. It was stiff with rust, but it turned. I rolled the metal door up. It rattled like gunfire in the quiet morning. The unit was small. It was not filled with furniture or boxes of clothes. In the center of the concrete floor sat a single object, a heavy oak desk. It was my grandfather's study desk, the one he used to write his letters at. I remembered playing under it while he worked. I walked in. The air was freezing and smelled of dust and cedar. I ran my hand over the wood. There were no drawers on the front. It was a partner's desk, solid and imposing. I looked for a latch. I looked for a seam. "Ring for truth," I whispered. I looked at the bell in my hand. I looked at the desk. On the right side, near the knee-hole, there was a small decorative rosette carved into the wood. It looked like a flower, or like the bottom of a bell. I pressed the brass bell against the rosette. It fit perfectly. I turned it. There was a click. A panel on the side of the desk popped open. My heart hammered in my ears. I reached into the dark cavity and pulled out a thick manila envelope. It was sealed with wax, red wax, stamped with my grandfather's signet ring. On the front, in shaky, cursive handwriting, was a single name: Ruby. I sat on the cold concrete floor. My hands were trembling so hard I could barely break the seal. I pulled out the letter. The paper was yellowed, brittle. My dearest Ruby, if you are reading this, then I have failed to protect you while I was alive. For that, I am eternally sorry. I am writing this because I do not trust the men who smile at your father. Mr. Sutter and his associates at the firm, they are not fiduciaries. Ruby, they are vultures. I have caught them trying to move assets without my signature. I have caught them whispering to your parents, feeding their fears, telling them that the world is dangerous and that only the firm can keep them safe. They want the trust. They want the liquidity. And you are the obstacle. I have created a pathway for you to take control if they ever try to remove you. But I fear they are cleverer than I am. I fear they will manufacture a reason to send you away. A reason that looks legal. That looks like it was your fault. They are grooming your parents. Ruby, they are teaching them to be afraid of you. They are telling your father that your independence is a threat to the family's stability. If you have been sent away, if you have been told to leave, do not believe that your parents stopped loving you. Believe that they were tricked. Believe that they were cornered. And most importantly, ask the question they do not want you to ask. Ask what happened immediately after you walked out the door. They will wait for you to leave before they make their move. They need you gone to do whatever it is they are planning. The chaos will start the moment your taillights disappear. Find the gap in the time. Ruby, the truth is hiding in the minutes they think you didn't see. Love, Grandpa. I lowered the letter. My breath plumed in the cold air. He knew. He had seen it coming 4 years before it happened. He saw Sutter grooming them, feeding their paranoia, preparing them for the moment when they would cut the cord. They need you gone to do whatever it is they are planning. The ambulance, the medical emergency wasn't an accident. It wasn't a random heart attack. If they needed me gone to do it, then the emergency was the goal. It was the event that required my absence. What happens in a house that requires an ambulance but also requires the witness to be banished first? A staged injury? A overdose? Or a victim who was brought into the house the moment I left? I stood up. The cold was no longer bothering me. I felt a fire burning in my chest, a cold, blue flame of rage. I had the original trust document. I had the grandfather's letter. I had the bell. And now I had a theory. Sutter and Lark Finch were running a scheme. They were using my family's estate for something illegal. Money laundering, perhaps, or high-risk leverage. And on Christmas night, 8 years ago, something went wrong with their scheme. Someone got hurt, someone important, and they used that injury to terrify my parents into signing the papers that erased me. The no child abuse line, I whispered, remembering something from the outline of my memory. My parents were terrified of Child Protective Services. Why? Because whatever happened in that house that night would have looked like negligence or violence. Sutter told them, "Send the girl away. If she is here when the police come, she will be taken into foster care. She will be questioned. Send her away to protect her." It was the perfect lie. It weaponized their love to ensure their compliance. I put the letter in my inside pocket. Next to my heart, I was done auditing. I was done asking polite questions. I was going to burn Graham Sutter's fortress to the ground. But first, I needed proof of who was in that ambulance. I walked out of the storage unit, the snow crunching under my boots. I pulled out my phone and dialed Vance. "I need you to dig deeper," I said. "I need to know who died or was hospitalized in Briar Glen on December 25th, 8 years ago. Cross-reference it with the client list of Lark and Finch." "Ruby," Vance said, his voice wary. "You sound dangerous." "I am," I said. "I am the unjust expulsion, and I'm about to activate the clause." I got into my car. The bell lay on the passenger seat. A silent passenger. Ring for truth. The truth was coming, and it was going to be loud. The digital dossier from Vance arrived with a notification sound that cracked through the silence of my hotel room like a pistol shot. I had been staring at the wall for an hour, the brass bell sitting on the nightstand, weighing my options. I opened the file. Vance had titled it, "The Briar Pattern." "You are not special, Ruby," Vance said when I picked up the phone. His voice was gravelly, tired. "That is the good news and the bad news. What happened to you happens to a lot of people who get too close to the blast radius of Lark and Finch." "Explain," I said. "I ran a cross-reference on the Crestvale Legal Group's filings in the county court," Vance said. "Specifically, looking for emergency amendments to family trusts. I found 12 cases in the last decade, all high-net-worth families, all in Briar Glen." 12? 12, Vance repeated, "and the pattern is identical. A public incident occurs, a divorce, a DUI, a sudden death in the family. Within 48 hours, Crestvale files for an emergency restructure of the assets to protect the principal. The beneficiaries are moved around, usually disinherited or placed into limited access funds, and who is the fiduciary managing the money every single time?" "Lark and Finch," I said. "Bingo. It is a harvest. Ruby, they wait for a family to bleed, and then they swoop in to manage the blood loss. By the time the family wakes up from the trauma, the firm has locked down the capital in high-fee, long-term holding vehicles that are impossible to exit." "So my banishment was just a harvest," I said. The thought made my stomach turn. I wasn't a daughter who had disappointed her parents. I was a yield event. "It looks that way," Vance said. "But your case is the only one with a sealed police record attached to the exact minute of the amendment. The other families just had legal paperwork. You had sirens. That makes you the anomaly. You are the loose end." "I need to see the sirens," I said. "I need proof." "The municipal logs are locked," Vance reminded me. "Sutter did a good job." "Sutter controls the government records," I said. "He does not control the private sector. I am going to find a camera." I hung up. I knew the neighborhood geography better than I knew my own face. The exit from the cul-de-sac onto the main road passed a small strip of commercial zoning, a dry cleaner, a high-end pet groomer, and a security systems installer called Safe Haven Tech. Safe Haven had been there since the 90s. The owner, a man named Mr. Henderson, was a paranoid genius who used his own shop front to demonstrate his camera resolution. He recorded the street 24 hours a day to prove that his cameras could catch license plates at 40 miles per hour. I drove there. The sign was faded, but the open light was buzzing. Mr. Henderson was behind the counter, soldering a circuit board. He looked up, his magnifying goggles making his eyes look enormous. "We are closed for lunch," he said. "I am not here to buy a system," I said. "I am here to buy data." I placed $500 bills on the counter. He took off the goggles. "What kind of data?" "Your street-facing camera," I said. "Archive footage, December 25th, 2016, between 8 and 9 in the evening." "That is 8 years ago," Henderson scoffed. "Cloud servers wipe that stuff after 90 days. "You do not use the cloud," I said. "You told my father once that the cloud was for idiots who wanted the NSA to watch them sleep. You use local cold storage, tape drives." Henderson narrowed his eyes. "Who are you?" "Ruby Hawthorne," I said. Recognition flickered in his face. "The runaway." "I need to see the road. Mr. Henderson, I need to know what drove past your shop 5 minutes after I did." He looked at the money. He looked at me. Then he grunted and walked into the back room. It took an hour. The smell of ozone and old dust was thick in the air. Henderson returned with a portable drive and plugged it into a monitor on the counter. "Found the tape," he muttered. "Quality is good. Night vision was active." He scrubbed the timeline. "Here," I said. Pause. On the grainy black and white screen, my beat-up sedan flashed past. I could see the silhouette of my head and Leo's small shape in the back seat. The timestamp read 2023-15. "Fast forward," I said. Slowly. The screen showed the empty road. Snow was falling, white streaks against the black asphalt. Minutes ticked by. 2, 3, 4. Then, at 20:28:40, lights appeared. "There," I whispered. An ambulance tore past the camera, its strobe lights flashing in a chaotic rhythm. It was followed closely by a black SUV with no markings. And then a police cruiser. They were moving fast. They were heading straight for the cul-de-sac. 5 minutes, I said. They were already rolling when I hit the main road. "That is a heavy response," Henderson noted. "Ambulance plus an escort? That is not a broken hip. That is a VIP call. Can you zoom in on the SUV?" He clicked a few keys. The image pixelated, then sharpened slightly. The license plate was unreadable, but there was a decal on the side door. It was faint, just a blur of a logo. It looked like a bird, a lark. "Lark and Finch," I said. "They're private security. You want a copy?" Henderson asked. "I want the original," I said. "And I want you to wipe it from your drive so no one knows I have it." I walked out with the drive in my pocket. It felt hot against my leg. Now I had the weapon. I just needed the target. I found my father at the community library. It was his sanctuary. When my mother's anxiety became too much, or the house became too quiet, he would go to the reference room and read biographies of dead presidents. He was sitting in a leather armchair near the window, a book open on his lap. But he wasn't reading. He was staring at the dust motes dancing in the light. He looked hollow. The titan of industry I remembered was gone. In his place was a man who looked like he was waiting for permission to breathe. I pulled a chair over and sat directly in front of him. He jumped, clutching the book. "Ruby?" "Hello, Dad," I said. I opened my laptop and placed it on the low table between us. "Ruby, please," he hissed, looking around. "People will see." "Let them see," I said. "They already think you are incompetent. Let them see you are a father." I hit play. The video played in silence. My car leaving, the snow falling, the ambulance screaming past, the security SUV. My father watched. His face went gray. His mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. "Who was in the ambulance? Dad?" I asked. My voice was low, steady. "I know you didn't call 911 because you were sad I left. I know you didn't have a panic attack. Who was it?" "I cannot," he whispered. Tears welled in his eyes. They said it would destroy everything." "Who is they?" I asked. "Sutter?" He nodded, a jerk of the head. "Dad," I said, leaning in, "I have the grandfather's letter. I know about the contingent clause. I know that if I was unjustly expelled, the trust comes to me. Sutter knew that too. He needed a reason to make my expulsion look like a safety measure. He needed a crisis." "It was an accident," my father sobbed. It was a broken, jagged sound. He collapsed." "Who collapsed?" "Mr. Sterling," my father said. The name meant nothing to me. "Who is Mr. Sterling?" "He was a guest, a friend of Graham's. He came for dinner. He was in the study. We were discussing an investment, a new opportunity for the family portfolio. He was drinking, he was laughing, and then—" My father's hand trembled. "Then you and your mother started arguing in the dining room. The voices got loud, and Mr. Sterling, he just fell. He hit his head on the hearth. There was so much blood. I felt a chill run down my spine." "He hit his head while we were arguing?" "Yes. Graham ran in. He checked the pulse. He said it looked bad. He said if the police came and found a dead man in the house while the family was screaming at each other, it would look like violence. He said they would arrest me. He said they would take Leo into protective custody because the environment was volatile." I closed my eyes. It was diabolical. Graham Sutter had used the chaos of a domestic argument to frame a medical emergency as a potential crime scene. He had terrified my father, a man who had never broken a law in his life, with the threat of prison and the loss of his grandson. "So Graham told you to get rid of me," I said. "He said you had to go. my father admitted. He said if you were there when the police arrived, they would question you. They would ask about the fighting. He said we needed a clean narrative. He told me to tell you to leave, to make it absolute, to make sure you didn't come back until it was resolved. And then? And then you left, my father said. And 5 minutes later, Graham called the ambulance. But, Ruby, Mr. Sterling didn't die. My eyes snapped open. He lived? Yes, it was a concussion, a bad one, but he lived. But Graham said it was too close. He said we had to sign papers to protect the assets from a lawsuit. He said Mr. Sterling was powerful. He said we had to lock down the trust so Sterling couldn't sue us for negligence. And those papers disinherited me. It was supposed to be temporary, my father pleaded. Just until the statute of limitations on the lawsuit ran out. But then the investments started failing, and Graham said we couldn't change anything or the whole house of cards would fall. Who was Mr. Sterling? I asked again. What did he do? He was an executive, my father said, with Maraway Holdings. I sat back. Maraway Holdings. Dad, I said, Maraway Holdings is a shell company. It is a feeder fund for high-risk debt. Lark and Finch use it to offload toxic assets. My father looked confused. No, Graham said it was exclusive. It is exclusive, I said. Exclusively fraudulent. Mr. Sterling wasn't a guest. He was a co-conspirator. And his fall was the leverage they needed to get you to sign over control of the grandfather's trust. No, my father whispered. Graham is my friend. Graham is your jailer, I said. He trapped you. He knew that if I stayed, I would eventually audit the books. I would have seen that Maraway was a scam. So he used Sterling's accident. Or maybe he even pushed him. Who knows? To create a panic. He forced you to banish the only person who could have saved you. My father put his head in his hands. He wept. It wasn't the polite weeping of a funeral. It was the ugly, the heaving sobbing of a man realizing he had thrown his child to the wolves to save a fortune that was already being stolen from him. Do not wake them up, he begged into his palms. Please, Ruby, if you expose this, Graham will destroy us. He has files. He has recordings. He has nothing, I said. He has fear, and fear is only a currency if you accept it. I stood up. I packed my laptop. I am not going to wake them up. Dad, I said, I am going to evict them. I left him in the library. I walked out into the cold afternoon air. I felt lighter than I had in 8 years. I wasn't the girl who was kicked out. I was the woman who was clearing the board. I drove back to the hotel. An unfamiliar car was parked next to my rental. A sleek, practical sedan with a university sticker on the back window. Leo. He was leaning against the hood of my car, shivering in a denim jacket that wasn't warm enough for Briar Glen. He looked so much like me it hurt. The dark eyes, the sharp jaw, the way he stood with his weight on one leg. Ready to bolt. You are supposed to be in school, I said, getting out. It is winter break. Mom, he said. And you are supposed to be auditing a bank in Harbor Point, not playing detective in a town you hate. I walked over and hugged him. He was taller than me now. He smelled of road snacks and teenage deodorant. I told you not to come, I said into his shoulder. You told me it was complicated, he said, pulling back. You didn't tell me it was dangerous. It is not dangerous. Mom, I Googled the firm, Leo said. Lark and Finch has pending litigation in 3 states. These aren't nice people, and you are here alone. I am not alone, I said. I have Vance, and I have you now, apparently. Did you find out why? Leo asked. Why they did it? Yes, I said. They did it because they were scared, and because someone used that fear to rob them. Are we going to see them? I saw your grandfather today, I said. He is broken. Leo, he is not the monster I remembered. He is just a victim who made a terrible choice. Does he know about me? He knows you are wonderful. Leo looked at the hotel. So what is the endgame? Do we sue them? Do we leave? We finish it, I said. We get the truth on the record, and then we leave on our own terms. We went inside. I ordered room service, burgers and fries, our tradition. We sat on the bed, and I walked him through the evidence. The bell, the letter, the video, the Maraway connection. Leo listened with the intensity of a student. He pointed at the Maraway chart. If Sterling was a Maraway executive, Leo said, and he was injured at the house, wouldn't there be a workers' comp claim? Or an insurance filing? Smart kid, I said. Vance is checking that now, but my guess is they settled it privately. Cash, from the trust. So they used your inheritance to pay off the guy who helped kick you out, Leo said. Exactly. There was a knock on the door. I froze. I signaled Leo to stay on the bed. I walked to the door and looked through the peephole. It wasn't a hitman. It was a courier in a blue uniform. I opened the door. Delivery for Ms. Hawthorne, the courier said. Sign here. I am Miss Griffin. Package is addressed to Hawthorne, at this hotel, room 212. I signed. He handed me a thick, creamy envelope with a gold seal. I closed the door and tore it open. Inside was a card of heavy cardstock, embossed with silver foil. The Briar Glen Benevolent Circle cordially invites you to the annual Christmas Charity Gala, hosted by Franklin and Eleanor Hawthorne, December 24th, 7 p.m. Guest of honor, Ms. Ruby Hawthorne. I stared at it. What is it? Leo asked. An invitation, I said, to a party at my parents' house on Christmas Eve. Why would they invite you? Leo asked. They spent 8 years pretending you don't exist. It is not from them, I said. Flipping the card over, there was a handwritten note on the back in elegant, jagged script. Ruby. Let us clear the air. For the sake of the family legacy, no lawyers, just neighbors. Graham. It is a trap, Leo said immediately. He wants you in the room so he can control the narrative. He wants to show everyone that you are back and everything is fine. If you go and smile, you validate his version of history. Or, I said, a slow smile spreading across my face. He wants to intimidate me. He thinks that if he puts me in that house, surrounded by the wealthy elite of Briar Glen, I will revert to being the scared 24-year-old girl. He thinks I will be too polite to make a scene. Will you? Leo asked. I am a compliance officer. Leo, I said, I do not make scenes. I make findings. You are going? I am going, I said, and I am taking this invitation as a summons. I am coming with you, Leo said. No, I said. It is not safe. You said it wasn't dangerous, he countered. And besides, the invite says, the Hawthorne family. That includes me. I was there when we got kicked out. Mom, I want to be there when we walk back in. I looked at him. He was right. He had been the collateral damage of that night. He deserved to see the resolution. Okay, I said, but you wear a suit, and you do not say a word unless I tell you to. You are my witness, not my soldier. Deal, Leo said. I looked at the invitation again. Graham Sutter was arrogant. He thought he could charm me, or shame me, into silence. He thought that by bringing me back to the scene of the crime, he could force me to kiss the ring. He didn't realize that I wasn't coming to reconcile. I was coming to activate Clause 7B. I picked up my phone and called Vance. I need one last thing, I said. I need a signature comparison. For what? For the temporary disinheritance filing, I said. I want you to pull the digital signature from the court record and compare it to my parents' signatures on the deed to their house. I have a feeling that in the panic of Mr. Sterling's accident, my parents might not have been steady enough to sign a complex legal document. You think Sutter forged it? I think Sutter does not trust anyone to do a job he can do himself, I said. If that signature is a forgery, the disinheritance is void. And if the disinheritance is void, I have been the legal trustee for 8 years. And if you are the trustee? Vance asked. Then I am going to fire everyone in that room, I said. I will get the analysis, Vance said. Be careful. Ruby, Christmas Eve in Briar Glen is when the wolves dress up as sheep. I know, I said. I am bringing my own wool. I hung up. What do we do now? Leo asked. Now, I said. We go shopping. If we are going to a gala, we need to look like we own the place. Because we might? Leo asked. Because we do, I said. I walked to the window and looked out at the snow. The lights of Briar Glen twinkled in the distance. Beautiful and deceptive. They had used Christmas to destroy me. They had used the music and the food and the tradition to mask a coup. Now, I was going to use their gala to unveil the rot. I touched the grandfather's letter in my pocket. Ask what happened after you walked out. I had the answer, and on Christmas Eve, everyone in Briar Glen was going to hear it. The hotel room had ceased to be a place to sleep. It was now a staging ground. I stood before the full-length mirror, adjusting the hem of my dress. It was black, floor-length, and severe. It was not a festive dress. It was the kind of garment worn by a woman who intends to deliver a eulogy or a subpoena. I wore no jewelry except for a pair of diamond studs that I had bought for myself after my first major promotion. On the bed, the evidence was laid out in a grid. The timeline I had constructed from the trust documents, the grandfather's letter, sealed in a fresh envelope to protect the brittle paper, the digital printout of the surveillance log showing the ambulance, the corporate org chart linking Lark and Finch to Maraway Holdings, and the brass bell. I picked up the bell and slipped it into my evening bag. It was heavy, a solid weight against my hip. You look terrifying, Leo said. He was sitting in the armchair, wearing a suit we had bought yesterday. He looked handsome, but he also looked young. His tie was slightly crooked. Come here, I said. He stood up. I fixed the knot, tightening it against his collar. Listen to me, I said, my voice low and steady. Tonight is not a party. Tonight is a deposition. We are going into a room full of people who have spent 8 years thinking I was a disaster. They are waiting for me to be messy. They are waiting for me to drink too much or cry or yell at my mother. And you won't, Leo said. I will not, I said. I will be boring. I will be polite. I will be ice. And if anyone asks you anything at all, you say, my mother is handling the estate matters. Do you understand? I understand, Leo said. He looked at me with dark, serious eyes. Are you scared? No, I lied. I am prepared. I checked the time. 7 o'clock. Let us go, I said. We drove to the house in silence. The roads were plowed, banking the snow high on the sides of the asphalt. As we turned onto the private drive leading to the heights, I saw the glow. My parents' house was lit up like a cathedral. Every window was blazing. The trees were wrapped in thousands of white lights. A line of luxury cars snaked up the driveway. Waiting for the valet, it was exactly as I remembered it. The smell of wood smoke in the air, the crunch of tires on gravel, the overwhelming, suffocating beauty of wealth on display. I handed the keys to the valet, a boy who looked no older than Leo. He didn't know who I was. He just handed me a ticket. Leo took my arm. We walked up the stone steps. The front door was open. Inside, the foyer was crowded with people holding champagne flutes. A string quartet was playing something Baroque in the corner. The air smelled of expensive perfume and pine. As we stepped across the threshold, the conversation nearest to the door stopped. Then the silence rippled outward. It moved like a wave through the room. People turned, heads tilted. Whispers started behind hands. Is that her? The daughter. She came back. Look at the dress. I did not look at the floor. I did not look at the ceiling. I looked straight ahead, wearing a small, pleasant smile that didn't reach my eyes. A woman in a red sequined gown stepped forward. It was Mrs. Gable, the president of the Benevolent Circle. She had known me since I was a toddler. She looked at me as if I were a ghost that had just materialized to ruin her seating chart. Ruby, she said. Her voice was pitched high, nervous. We were not sure you would actually come. The invitation was quite compelling, I said. My voice was calm. carrying easily over the sudden hush of the room. "And it is for a good cause. It is lovely to see you, Mrs. Gable." I did not offer a hug. I waited. "Well," she stammered, "welcome home. Your parents are—" "They are in the drawing room." "Thank you," I said. I moved through the crowd. Leo stayed glued to my side. The guests parted for us, creating a wide channel. I saw faces I recognized, old neighbors. My high school principal, the banker who had denied my first business loan application. They watched me with a mixture of hunger and apprehension. They wanted a scene. They wanted the Ruby who stormed out 8 years ago. They wanted the prodigal daughter to fall on her knees. I gave them nothing. I nodded politely to a man I recognized. I took a glass of sparkling water from a passing waiter. I moved with the precision of a shark patrolling a reef. "Ruby!" The voice came from the right. I turned. Graham Sutter was making his way toward us. He held a scotch in one hand. He was wearing a velvet tuxedo jacket that looked ridiculous and expensive. He was smiling, but his eyes were scanning the room, darting toward the front door behind me. He was waiting for someone. "Graham," I said, "you look festive." "I am delighted you made it," he said, stepping into my personal space. He smelled of scotch and mint. "And this must be Leo. My God, look at him. A man." Leo didn't smile. He just stared at Graham with a flat, unimpressed expression that made me incredibly proud. "Leo is just observing tonight," I said, stepping slightly in front of my son. "I got your note, Graham. No lawyers, just neighbors. That is a charming sentiment." "I meant it," Graham said. "Your parents are fragile. Ruby, I wanted this night to be a bridge, a soft re-entry into society for you." "A soft re-entry," I repeated. "Is that what this is? Or is it a public display to prove that the family is intact so the investors stop asking questions about liquidity?" Graham's smile tightened at the corners. "You are cynical, Ruby. It is an unattractive quality. I am an auditor, Graham. Cynicism is my overhead." He glanced at the door again. A quick, nervous flick of the eyes. "Who are you expecting?" I asked. "No one," he said too quickly. "Just donors, big donors. We want everything to be perfect." "I am sure it will be," I said. "Excuse me. I see someone I need to speak with." I didn't wait for his permission. I walked away, guiding Leo toward the far side of the room near the fireplace. I had spotted a man standing alone by the mantel. He was younger than the other guests, perhaps 40, with the slicked-back hair and aggressive posture of a private equity shark. He was checking his phone every 30 seconds. I knew his face from the dossier Vance had sent. Arthur Kincaid, the current vice president of operations for Maraway Holdings, the man who took over after Mr. Sterling retired. "Stay here," I told Leo. "Drink your soda. Look bored." "I am not bored," Leo whispered. "This is intense." I walked up to Kincaid. "The architecture is Georgian," I said, gesturing to the room. "But the foundation is cracking." Kincaid looked up, startled. He assessed me in a second. Clothes, jewelry, confidence. He decided I was worth talking to. "It usually is in these old places," he said. "Arthur Kincaid." "Ruby Griffin," I said. He paused. The name registered. "Griffin or Hawthorne?" "Griffin is the name on my business license," I said. "Hawthorne is the name on the deed to the house you are standing in." He stiffened. "I heard you were in town." "I am sure you did," I said. "I assume you are here representing Maraway? Checking on your investment?" "We support local charities," he said smoothly. "I am sure," I said. "Like you supported Mr. Sterling after his accident in this very room 8 years ago." Kincaid choked on his drink. He coughed, covering his mouth with a napkin. He looked around wildly. "I do not know what you are talking about," he hissed. "I think you do," I said, stepping closer. Sterling fell. He hit his head on that hearth right there. And 5 minutes later, my inheritance was used to buy his silence so Maraway wouldn't sue my father for negligence. That is how it worked, isn't it? A settlement for reputational risk? Kincaid stared at me. The color had drained from his face. "Look," he said, his voice dropping to a whisper. "That was before my time. I just managed the portfolio. The settlement was sealed. If you breach that confidentiality—" "I didn't sign it," I cut him off. "My parents signed it, under duress, which makes it voidable. And if I void it, Mr. Kincaid, the audit trail leads right back to your fund." He looked terrified, not of me, but of the situation. "We were told the family was contained. Sutter said the daughter was out of the picture." "Sutter lied," I said. "Enjoy the party." I walked away. My heart was hammering, but I kept my breathing even. Confirmation. There was a settlement. There was money paid to hide the injury. I felt a vibration in my clutch. My phone. I pulled it out discreetly. It was an email from Vance. Subject: The ink. I opened the attachment. It was a high-resolution image of 2 signatures. On the left was my father's signature from a check written in 2015. Fluid, looping, confident. On the right was the signature from the Temporary Disinheritance Amendment, dated December 25, 2016. The second signature was jagged. The pen pressure was uneven. The H in Hawthorne trailed off into a shaky line. Underneath, Vance had written, "Forensic analysis confirms high probability of physical guidance or extreme physiological tremor." This wasn't signed. It was steered. Someone held his hand or he was shaking so bad he couldn't hold the pen. Duress. I looked across the room. My parents had just entered from the hallway. They looked like ghosts, dressed in finery. My father wore a tuxedo that hung loose on his frame. My mother wore a silver gown, her hair perfectly coiffed, but her eyes were darting around the room like a trapped animal. They were smiling, but it was a grimace. They were shaking hands, but they were not present. Graham Sutter was at their elbow immediately, whispering something in my father's ear. My father nodded, obedient. I felt a surge of rage so hot it almost made me dizzy, but I pushed it down. I converted it into cold, hard resolve. "Leo," I said, "come with me." I walked toward my parents. I did not stop when Graham tried to intercept me. I did not stop when Mrs. Gable tried to introduce me to a donor. I walked straight up to my father. "Kitchen," I said. "Ruby," my mother gasped. "We are greeting guests." "Kitchen," I repeated. "Now, or I start reading the grand jury testimony I have drafted in my head out loud to the string quartet." My father looked at me. He saw something in my face that he hadn't seen in 8 years. He saw the truth. "Excuse us," he said to the couple he was talking to. "Family matter." They followed me. Graham started to follow too. "No," I said, turning on him. "Family only." "I am the family attorney," Graham said, his voice hard. "Not for the next 10 minutes, I said. "If you step through those doors, Graham, I will scream. And I do not mean a polite scream. I mean a scream that will end this gala." He stopped. He glared at me, his mask slipping. "Make it quick. Ruby, we have a schedule." I led my parents and Leo through the swinging doors into the catering kitchen. It was chaotic. Waiters were rushing back and forth with trays of hors d'oeuvres. Steam rose from giant pots. The smell was different, roasted beef instead of goose, but the heat and the noise were the same. "Out," I said to the head caterer. "Excuse me?" he said, holding a ladle. "Everyone out," I said, my voice projecting over the clatter of pans. "Now, clear the room. 5 minutes." The caterer looked at my father. My father nodded wearily. "Give us a moment," my father said. The staff filed out, grumbling, leaving trays half-prepped on the stainless steel counters. The room fell silent, save for the hum of the refrigerator. I stood by the island in the center. My parents stood by the ovens. Leo stood by the door, guarding it. It was the same geography, the same players, just 8 years later. "Ruby," my mother said, her hands twisting together. "Why are you doing this? Graham said, if we just get through tonight—" "Stop listening to Graham," I said. I reached into my bag and pulled out the bell. I set it on the metal counter. Thunk. My mother stared at it. She let out a small whimper. "You gave this to me," I said. "You told me not to trust the paperwork. I listened to you. Mom, I audited the paperwork, and I audited the night." I looked at my father. "I know about Mr. Sterling," I said. My father flinched as if I had slapped him. "I know he fell," I continued. "I know he bled on the hearth, and I know Graham told you that if the police found him there, you would lose everything." "It was an accident," my father whispered. "But it looked violent." "Graham told you to sign the papers," I said. "He told you to disinherit me. He guided your hand, didn't he?" "I have the analysis." "Dad, your signature is a mess. Were you crying? Or was he holding your wrist?" My father looked at his hands. "I was shaking. I couldn't stop shaking." "Why?" I asked. "Why were you so afraid? It was an accident. People have accidents. Why did you think the police would arrest you?" "Because of the fighting," my mother burst out. "Graham said because we were screaming at you, because I told you we're a disappointment. He said the police would see us as unstable. He said they would say the environment was abusive." She looked at Leo, her eyes filled with tears. "He said they would take the boy," she whispered. The room went deadly still. Leo took a step forward. "Me?" "Graham said that with a head injury in the house and a family dispute in progress, Child Protective Services would intervene automatically." My mother sobbed. "He said they would put Leo in foster care pending an investigation. He said we would never see him again. He said the only way to protect the child was to remove him from the scene before the ambulance arrived." I felt the air leave my lungs. "The no child abuse line," I said softly. "It wasn't a metaphor. It was literal. Graham Sutter had looked at a terrified, wealthy couple and convinced them that the only way to save their grandson from the state was to banish their daughter. He said, 'Tell her to leave and never return,'" my father said, his voice cracking. "He wrote the words down for me. He said, 'If she comes back, the investigation opens. If she stays away, the file stays closed.' He said we had to be cruel to be kind. We had to cut you off to save Leo." "And the disinheritance?" I asked. "He said it was necessary to show the authorities we had severed ties with the volatile element," my father said. "He said it was just paper. He promised he would fix it once the statute of limitations passed. But every year he said it was still too risky. He said Maraway was watching. He said Sterling was watching." "Sterling was paid off with your money," I said. "Graham drained the trust to pay a settlement to his own crony, and he kept you terrified of a CPS investigation that never would have happened." "What?" my mother asked. "It was a lie. Mom," I said. "CPS doesn't take children because a guest slips on a rug. Graham made it up. He invented a boogeyman to make you sign over the grandfather's money." My mother put a hand to her mouth. She swayed. My father caught her. "He lied?" my father whispered. "About Leo?" "He used Leo as a hostage," I said. "And he used me as a scapegoat. And he has been robbing you for 8 years while you sat in this house afraid to make a phone call." My father's face changed. The gray, defeated look vanished. In its place, a flush of red rose up his neck. His hands curled into fists. "He has been here every Christmas," my father said, his voice trembling with a new kind of shaking, rage. "Drinking my scotch, telling me he saved my family." "He didn't save your family," I said. "He stole it." I looked at the bell. "Grandpa knew," I said. "He left me a letter. He told me to ask what happened after I left. He knew Graham was grooming you." My mother looked at me. "Ruby, we didn't know. We thought we were protecting him." She pointed at Leo. "We missed him every day. We missed you every day." "I know," I said. I wanted to hug them. I wanted to collapse into my mother's arms and cry for the 8 years we lost. I wanted to be the daughter, But I couldn't be the daughter yet. I had to be the auditor. We can cry later, I said. Right now, we have a problem. Graham is out there. He's waiting for something. He keeps checking the door. He is waiting for the audit certification, my father said. He brought papers tonight. He said since you were here, we needed to sign a final release to prove to the benevolent circle that the family dispute was resolved. He wants us to sign it on stage, during the speech. A final release, I said. He wants to close the loop. He wants me to sign away my claim publicly so he can liquidate the rest of the assets. What do we do? Leo asked. I looked at the three of them. My father, furious. My mother, awakened. My son, watching. We go back out there, I said. We get on that stage, and we give the speech Graham wants, but we do not read his script. I can't face him, my mother said. I can't. Yes, you can, I said. You survived 8 years of silence. You can survive 5 minutes of truth. I picked up the bell. I am not going to expose Mr. Sterling, I said. That is a private medical matter. But I'm going to expose the coercion. I am going to expose the theft. And I'm going to introduce Graham Sutter to the concept of a hostile takeover. Ruby, my father said. He straightened his tuxedo jacket. He looked at me, and for the first time in a decade, he looked like the head of the household. I am sorry. I know, Dad, I said. Fix it. How? Back me up, I said. When I take the microphone, do not interrupt me, and when Graham tries to stop me, you tell him to sit down. I can do that, my father said. Good, I said. Leo, you stay with Grandma. If Graham comes near her, step in between. Got it, Leo said. I smoothed my dress. I checked my reflection in the chrome surface of the refrigerator. I looked dangerous. Let us go, I said. The donors are waiting. We walked back out through the swinging doors. The noise of the party hit us like a wall. The string quartet was playing Silent Night. Graham was standing by the stage, checking his watch. When he saw us emerge, he smiled. It was a victory smile. He thought he had won. He thought the kitchen meeting was just a family tearjerker that would end in compliance. He raised his glass to me. I walked toward the stage. I didn't smile back. I walked past the donors. I walked past the gossip. I walked up the 3 steps to the platform where the microphone stood. The room went silent. The music faded out. Graham looked confused. He hadn't signaled for the speeches yet. He started to walk toward the stage. His hand raised in a stop gesture. I gripped the microphone stand. I looked out at the sea of faces. I saw the Maraway representative sweating near the fireplace. I saw my parents standing tall near the back. I saw Leo watching me. Good evening, I said. My voice was clear, amplified, filling every corner of the house that had once banished me. My name is Ruby Hawthorne, I said, and 8 years ago, on Christmas night, I was asked to leave this house. Graham froze. He was 10 feet away from the stage. His eyes went wide. I was told to leave, I continued, because my family was afraid. They were told that if I stayed, they would lose everything. They were told lies by people they trusted. I looked directly at Graham. But tonight, I said, reaching into my bag and pulling out the brass bell, I have returned, and I did not come back to sign a release. I came back to ring for the truth. I set the bell on the podium. The room held its breath. I took a piece of paper from my pocket. Not a speech, but the grandfather's letter. My grandfather, Elias Hawthorne, built this trust to support this community, I said. He did not build it to settle private debts. He did not build it to be drained by fees and hush money. Graham lunged forward. Ruby, that is enough. You are drunk. I am sober. Graham, I said. And I am the trustee. A gasp went through the room. Clause 7B, I said into the mic. Unjust expulsion. It activates immediately upon proof of coercion, and I have the proof. I held up the flash drive from the security camera. Graham Sutter, I said. "You are fired." The silence shattered. The silence that followed my declaration was absolute. It was not the quiet of a library. It was the vacuum of a room where the oxygen had been suddenly, violently removed. Graham Sutter stood 10 feet away from me. His hand was half raised, frozen in a gesture of command that no one was obeying. His face, usually a mask of tanned, senatorial confidence, had gone the color of wet ash. He looked at the flash drive in my hand, then at the crowd, then at my father. He realized, perhaps for the first time in 8 years, that he was not the only person in the room who knew how to weaponize a document. I turned back to the microphone. The feedback whine had died down. I lowered the flash drive and placed it next to the brass bell on the podium. I adjusted the stand, taking a moment to look out at the sea of faces, the faces of Briar Glen's elite, the people who had whispered about my instability for a decade. "I apologize for the disruption," I said. My voice was calm. It was the voice I used when presenting a forensic audit to a board of directors. "I know you came here for champagne and charity. You came to support the Benevolent Circle, an organization my grandfather, Elias Hawthorne, helped found 40 years ago." I saw Mrs. Gable, the Circle's president, standing near the front. Her hands were clutching her pearl necklace. "My grandfather believed in legacy," I continued. "He believed that wealth was a responsibility, not a shield, but for the last 8 years, the legacy of this family, and the administration of many trusts in this room, has been managed not by responsibility, but by fear." Graham took a step forward. "Ladies and gentlemen," he boomed, trying to project his voice over the sound system. "Please. This is a private family matter that has clearly spiraled out of control. Ruby is distraught. If the band could please play." "The band will wait," my father said. It was not a shout. It was a rumble. My father, Franklin Hawthorne, stepped out from the shadows of the stage wing. He looked terrifyingly tired. But he was standing straight. He walked past Graham without looking at him and stood next to me. He did not take the microphone. He just stood there. A silent sentinel. Graham stopped. He looked at my father, stunned. The visual of the united front, father and daughter, broke his momentum. I continued. "Paperwork is a powerful thing," I said. "It can build schools. It can secure futures. But in the wrong hands, paperwork steals voices. It creates narratives that never happened. It invents emergencies to justify theft. It uses the language of protection to enforce exile." I reached into my portfolio, which Leo had carried up to the stage for me, and pulled out a thick, sealed envelope. It was heavy, legal-sized, bound with a red string. "Mrs. Gable," I said, "this is for you." I walked to the edge of the stage and held it out. Mrs. Gable hesitated, looking at Graham, then at me. She stepped forward and took it. "That is a formal petition," I told the room. "It is signed by me. As the trustee of the Hawthorne estate, it calls for an independent, third-party forensic audit of all charitable trusts managed by Lark and Finch Fiduciary within the Briar Glen community. It outlines a pattern of irregularities, fee structures that exceed industry standards by 300%, and liquidity events that coincide suspiciously with private family crises." A murmur went through the room. This was not gossip. This was money. And in Briar Glen, money was the only religion that mattered. "You cannot do that," Graham hissed, abandoning his charm. He walked right up to the stage, gripping the edge of the platform. His knuckles were white. "That is libel, Ruby. I will have you in court for the next 20 years. You are dragging this community through the mud because you are angry that you were cut off." "I was not cut off, Graham," I said, looking down at him. "I was erased, and you held the eraser." "This is insane," Graham said, turning to the donors. "She is talking about an audit? She has no standing. She is a disinherited beneficiary with a grudge. There is no legal basis for her claims. The file is closed." "The file is open," I said. Because at 6:59 this evening, 2 minutes before I walked through these doors, my associate filed a formal complaint with the State Attorney General's office regarding elder abuse, coercion, and fiduciary fraud. The color left Graham's face entirely. I also filed a motion to unseal the emergency response logs from December 25th, 8 years ago, I added, and I attached a sworn affidavit from a witness regarding the true nature of the medical emergency that night. I saw Arthur Kincaid, the Maraway executive, turn abruptly and walk toward the exit. He moved fast, abandoning his drink on a side table. He knew what a state investigation meant. It meant the Maraway shell game was over. "You filed?" Graham whispered. "You have no idea what you have done. You have destroyed your parents." "No," I said. "I liberated them." I looked at my father. "Dad," I said gently, moving the microphone slightly toward him. "Tell them." My father looked out at the crowd. He looked at his friends. He looked at the neighbors who had pitied him for his bad investments. He took a deep breath, and I saw his shoulders shake. "We did not banish her," he said. His voice was thin, unamplified, but the room was so silent that everyone heard him. "Speak up, Frank," a man in the back shouted. "Mr. Henderson from the security shop." My father leaned toward the mic. "We did not banish her because we were angry," he said, his voice gaining strength. "We told her to leave because we were terrified." He looked at Graham. "We were told," my father said, "that if Ruby stayed, the police would take our grandson. We were told that a tragic accident in our home would be twisted into a crime. We were told that the only way to keep the family safe was to break it apart." A gasp rippled through the room. "We were coached," my father continued. Tears were running down his face now, but he didn't wipe them away. "Every word I said to her that night, every hateful thing, it was written for me, by him." He pointed a shaking finger at Graham. "He told us it was protection, but it was a prison. He kept us afraid for 8 years so he could use our money to cover his own mistakes." "Frank, stop," Graham shouted. "You are emotional. You do not know what you are saying." "I know exactly what I am saying," my father roared. The sound echoed off the high ceilings. "I am saying that you stole my daughter, you stole my grandson, and you stole my self-respect." He turned to the crowd. "Larkin Finch is a lie," my father declared. "If you have money with them, get it out. Get it out now." The room fractured. It wasn't a sudden explosion. It was a crumbling. The social glue that held the gala together dissolved. I saw men in tuxedos pulling out their phones, dialing bankers and lawyers. I saw women stepping away from the Lark and Finch partners who were scattered through the room. Mrs. Gable opened the envelope I had given her. She scanned the first page. She looked up, her face hard. She turned to a waiter. "Show Mr. Sutter out?" "You cannot be serious," Graham sputtered. "This is my event. I organized this." "You are a liability, Graham," Mrs. Gable said coldly, "and the benevolent circle does not associate with liabilities." Graham looked around. He looked for allies. He looked for Kincaid. But Kincaid was gone. He looked at the donors, but they were turning their backs, forming tight circles of whispered damage control. He looked at me. There was no charm left, no patronizing smile, just pure, unadulterated hatred. "You think you won?" he hissed, leaning in so only I could hear. "You think you can just come back here and play house? You destroyed this family. Ruby, there is no coming back from this. You burned it down." "I know," I said. "I like the view better without the walls." He straightened his jacket. He tried to muster some dignity, but it was like trying to inflate a shredded tire. He turned and walked toward the door. The crowd parted for him, not out of respect, but out of contamination fears. No one wanted to be seen standing next to the man who was about to be investigated by the state. When the front door closed behind him, the room let out a collective breath. The music did not start again. The party was over. I stepped back from the podium. My legs felt heavy, as if the adrenaline that had been holding me up was suddenly draining away into the floorboards. My mother was standing at the bottom of the stage stairs. She was looking up at me with an expression I couldn't quite place. Awe, perhaps, mixed with a terrible, crushing sorrow. "Ruby," she whispered. I walked down the steps. Leo was there immediately, standing at my shoulder, a physical buffer between me and the room. "We should go," Leo said. "Mom, you did it. Let us go." "Wait," my mother said. She reached out and touched my arm. Her hand was trembling. "Ruby, please, do not leave. Not again. We can fix this. Your father and I, we can explain everything. We can make it up to you." I looked at her. I looked at the woman who had watched me pack my car 8 years ago and said nothing. I saw the fear that had ruled her. I saw the love that had been weaponized against her. I felt a pang of pity, sharp and deep, but I did not feel a desire to stay. "You cannot make it up to me. Mom," I said gently. "You missed 8 years. You missed Leo's first soccer game. You missed his graduation from middle school. You missed the nights I cried myself to sleep wondering why I wasn't good enough. You cannot buy those back, not with money, and not with apologies. But you are here," she pleaded. "We are a family. We are relatives," I corrected. "Family is the people who show up when it is hard, not the people who send you away when it gets complicated." "Do not say that," my father said. Coming down the stairs, he looked older than he had 10 minutes ago, deflated by the adrenaline crash. "Ruby, this is your home. Clause 7B, the trust. It is yours. The house is yours." I looked around the room, the crystal chandeliers, the velvet drapes, the portraits of ancestors who probably had their own secrets buried in the garden. "I do not want the house," I said. "Sell it. Use the money to pay back the people Graham stole from. Use it to rebuild your own lives somewhere else, somewhere smaller, somewhere without so many shadows." "But where will you go?" my mother asked. "Home," I said. "To Harbor Point, to my job, to my life. Can we—" my mother's voice broke. "Can we call you?" I looked at Leo. He was watching them with a guarded expression. He didn't hate them. I realized. He just didn't know them. They were strangers who shared his DNA. "You can call," I said. "Slowly. We can have coffee. In a month. In a public place. We can try to build a relationship." "Mom? But I am not moving back. I am not going to be the daughter who came home to save the estate. I am the woman who came back to close the file." "I understand," my father said. He nodded, a slow, painful movement. "We deserve that." "Yes," I said. "You do." I stepped back. "Goodbye, Mom. Goodbye, Dad." I turned and walked toward the door. The guests watched us go. There was no applause. There were no whispers. There was just a respectful, stunned silence. I walked past Mrs. Gable, who nodded at me. I walked past the spot where the string quartet had abandoned their instruments. We stepped out the front door. The cold hit me like a blessing. It was crisp and clean, smelling of snow and pine needles. The Christmas lights wrapped around the pillars were still twinkling. Indifferent to the destruction that had just happened inside, I walked down the stone steps. The valet was gone, probably hiding from the tension. So I walked to the key rack by the podium and found my own keys. "Mom," Leo said. I stopped on the driveway. I looked up at the night sky. It was a vast, indifferent black, speckled with stars that looked like diamonds on velvet. "Are you okay?" Leo asked. I took a deep breath. I let the cold air fill my lungs, chasing out the scent of stale perfume and old fear. "I am," I said, and I was surprised to find that it was true. "I feel light." "You were amazing in there," Leo said. "Scary, but amazing." "I learned from the best," I said, smiling at him. Grandpa Elias would have enjoyed the show. "Do you think they will be okay?" Leo asked, looking back at the house. "Grandma and Grandpa?" "I do not know," I said. They have to learn how to be adults for the first time in a long time. They have to learn how to live without Graham telling them what to do. It will be hard, but that is not our work. Leo, that is theirs. So we just go home? We go home, I said. We order pizza, we watch a movie that has nothing to do with Christmas, and tomorrow, I go back to work. Leo kicked at a pile of snow. I kind of like the suit, though. Keep the suit, I said. You earned it. I unlocked the car. I looked back at the house one last time. It was still beautiful. It was still imposing, but it no longer held any power over me. The ghost of the 24-year-old girl who had driven away weeping was gone. She had been replaced by the woman who had driven back and rung the bell. The truth was out. The paperwork was filed. The voices had been returned to their owners. I got into the driver's seat. Leo got in beside me. Ready? I asked. Ready, he said. I put the car in gear and drove down the long, winding driveway. I passed the spot where the ambulance had been. I passed the spot where I had last seen my parents' faces in the rearview mirror 8 years ago. This time, I didn't look back. I looked forward, at the road illuminated by my headlights, cutting a path through the darkness toward the highway, toward the ocean, toward home. Thank you for listening to Leave and Never Return. This story was a journey into the dark corners of family secrets and the power of standing up to the systems that try to silence us. I hope Ruby's fight for clarity and dignity resonated with you. I would love to hear your thoughts on the ending. Do you think Ruby was right to walk away? Or should she have stayed to help her parents rebuild? And where are you listening from today? Please drop a comment below and let me know. It is always fascinating to see how far these stories travel. If you enjoyed this story and want to hear more tales of betrayal, justice, and resilience, please make sure to subscribe to Revenge Stories. Your support helps us bring more of these narratives to life. Thank you for your time. And remember, sometimes the best revenge is just the truth.